All right, friends, today I have an amazing guest on our podcast. She's an author, a catalyst, an executive coach, a keynote speaker. She likes to challenge her audience to think bigger and accept greater challenges that are beyond their current limited beliefs. Laura, thanks for joining me today.
I'm so glad to be here, Jen.
Yay! You've had a dynamic career, working in politics, executive search, entrepreneurship, and now a best-selling author and speaker. What thread connects all these chapters of your life?
I think the thread that connects everything is just my insatiable hunger to just get people unstuck, right? Like, I think we're all so stuck by some definition that somebody gave us at some point in our lives saying, like, this is what you can be and what you should be and what you must be, and God forbid what you can't be. And we get stuck in that one paradigm, and there's so much more to each of us. And the problem is that we get stuck in that paradigm before we literally don't have a frontal lobe, like the part of our brain that dictates good, sound, logical decision making. So we create this entire path for ourselves and this entire identity for ourselves, and then we get stuck. And I have always been able to see the greatness in other people and in fairly short order be like, this is what makes you special. Here you go. And when somebody sees that, it's kind of hard for them to unsee it. And so I'm just insatiably hungry for that light that goes on inside of somebody's eyes. And they're like, oh, you mean I can do more? Like, I'm allowed to do more? There's more inside of me? Like that, through all of my, everything I've ever done, that's really been I think the thread.
What a great talent and skill to have, right? To look at somebody, see their magnificence, and then help them take a step into that.
It is sometimes heartbreaking, though, because sometimes you see the greatness in somebody. Like my very best quality is that I see the very best version of people, but not just the very best version of them. I see the very best version of the very best version of them. So like I can see their brilliance. And I can see what they're capable of doing. And sometimes they can't. Yeah. And sometimes they can, but they don't want to do the work for it. And sometimes when that happens, they resent me because I become the inconvenient truth of the person who like reminds them of their potential and what they're choosing not to grab, right?
Yeah,
so, it's a great skill to have, but it does sometimes lead to heartbreak.
Hey, you know what? That's not your responsibility, right? Like
it's true.
They can do what they want with the information. So please have at it. You haven't followed a traditional path. Instead, you started to create your own. What gave you that like confidence or wherewithal that says this doesn't have to look a certain way, I'm allowed to create it?
I didn't have confidence to do that. I think it's really easy for people to come on podcasts like this and tell the story in reverse, right?
Yeah.
And talk about how like, oh, well, then I decided to do this and it was successful. And then I decided to do that and it was successful. And I decided to do that and it was successful too. When in fact, most of the time, and I know this from interviewing thousands of leaders during a 20-year career in executive search, the only interesting people who I interviewed, again, thousands of leaders over the course of 20 years, the only interesting people were the ones who made left turns and right turns and U-turns, because it's in the failure and the picking themselves up that they understood what they cared about. Like everyone's like, follow your passion. And I think that's the world's worst advice, because follow your passion says, all you need to do is find your passion and then follow it and everything's going to be amazing. And all that says is the very first time things get hard, the first time you get rejected, the first time somebody tells you no, the first time you're in a car accident, right? The first time something happens, you go, oh, I guess this isn't my passion. I'll do something else. But the truth is that your passion is going to pick you up and throw you down and gut you. And it's going to have its way with you in your bank account and your heart and your confidence until you finally get over the hump, right? And the question isn't like, what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail? The question is, what would you do if you knew for sure you would fail? And yet you would do it over and over and over until you got it right. And so for me, I never had confidence. I never had this idea of where I was going to go and then crafted a strategic, path to get there. I just fell into interesting opportunities with interesting people, right? And I think if you do interesting work with interesting people, all sorts of interesting doors open. And so for me, it was just like a question of, oh, well, I've done this to the very best of my ability. And I could maybe get a little bit better, but it's going to take a whole lot more work to get a little bit better. Maybe there's something else out there that's the next puzzle to solve. And so I just kept sort of finding things that were interesting to do with interesting people. And all sorts of interesting doors that I never knew existed turned out to be behind those opportunities.
There was a lot there that was so magical that everybody who's listening, feel free to rewind and play that again, because I think your passion is the thing that you would do every day if you still failed.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right? That's a huge takeaway, because a lot of times we think, oh, well, it should be easy. And if it's not easy, then that must be the wrong thing. No. It's not. No one ever said it's easy. It's never easy. It's what are you willing to do when it's hard, and you're keep willing to do it every single day that is hard.
Right. Think about the times where you have been so busy doing crap you hated. And I run into you in the coffee shop. I'm like, how you doing, Jen? You're like, oh, I'm so busy. But what if you were so busy doing stuff you loved? You'd never be like, oh, I'm so busy. You'd just be like, wow, I'm in flow state, right? I'm creative. Yeah. I'm rocking and rolling and things are great. It's not that it's hard. That's the problem. It's that we don't care about the result. That's where all of the unhappiness comes from.
Yeah. So you talk about getting unstuck a lot. You help others with it. When is a time in your own life that you felt stuck, and how did you break free?
So I'll tell you about when I left the White House and I went to go work for an executive search firm, the big executive search firm, marquee name, very elite, very prestigious. And I spent 4 years there working for the best and the brightest, how to do this work at the highest possible levels. And then one day I had this realization that the way that we were doing the work, the model of executive search didn't really solve the problem for my clients in the way that we thought it did, right? Just didn't sit right with me. The way that I was disincentivized to do the most important work for the hardest clients. And so I walked into my boss's office one day, having had this realization, this moment of rage that the work could be done better and faster and smarter and with more authenticity and more integrity and less cost to our clients, but more profit to us if we just reorganize the way that we did it. And I was like, there's a better way. And he was like, there's the door. And basically he was like, you can stay and do it our way. We love you. You're doing great work. But if you want to do it your way, you have to leave. And in that moment, I, like a typical entrepreneur, I realized that I wasn't part of my clients' solutions, which left me in only one place, which was that I was part of their problem. And that was untenable for me.
Yeah.
And so I left and I started my own firm, and I was 6 weeks. I was about to give birth to my first child. I was 6 weeks post an unplanned C-section when I got a call from somebody that I worked with in the White House who was like, hey, so gross. I heard you had a baby, huh? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, cool, I guess. But are you still doing executive search? Because our CEO just left and we need somebody. And I was like, yes. And she was like, great. What are you going to charge me? And I was like, $100 an hour. And she was like, great, send me a contract. And literally baby in one arm, I was like, I pecked on the keys, how to write a professional service contract. And I sent her a contract and my business was born, right? And I ran that business I built it into a global executive search firm, ran it for 15 years, sold it to the women who helped me build it. But I was so stuck in that moment of, I know that I'm not part of the solution, the change I want to be in the world. I'm not manifesting my values on a daily basis. I have no control or autonomy over how I do the work, where I do the work, who I do it for, how I'm getting paid for it. And I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay where I was. And I think so many times when we feel stuck, it's not because we can pinpoint exactly what's wrong. We just know we're having organ failure, organ rejection for where we are at present. And I was lucky because I was about to have a baby that I had this blip of a moment in time where I didn't run away from the thing that made me stuck into something else that might have been worse. And I think a lot of people, when they're stuck, make that mistake. And they, instead of running towards something, they run away from something. And so my first book, Limitless, was really around this question of how do you create a definition of success that works for you at each age and at each life stage, so that we don't try to get ourselves unstuck by just getting ourselves stuck in something the same or even worse.
Yeah. And I read that book, Limitless, that you wrote. There's so many good examples of you defining your limit and you defining your career and what that is. And I think one of the examples in the book was the janitor was sweeping the floor or whatever. And somebody had asked him, what's your role here? Well, I'm helping putting somebody in space.
Exactly.
And so right? And so when you can look at that of, hey, I might be doing this thing, but this thing helps make this other thing happen. And so I'm not limited by the definition of my job because I view it as a part of this whole.
And a lot of people feel stuck because they don't feel like their work has any connection whatsoever. We did a global survey starting in 2019 where we have 10,000 responses from 74 different countries in every possible demographic and every possible industry. And from that, we learned that less than half of all workers understand how their work on a daily basis connects to the long-term mission of their company. We learned that less than half of all workers even understand what the long-term vision of the company is. And we learned that less than half of all workers even understand what they themselves need to do on a daily basis just to do to get to their own goals. And for most people, it's not that their work itself isn't connected. They just don't know that it's connected to anything that matters. Like, how many times have you sat in on a corporate event where the CEO gets on stage and they're like, here's all the amazing things in store for the company long term. And everybody in the audience is glazing over. And afterwards, the CEO's like, I don't understand. Why aren't they excited? We're going to have 10x the growth and we're going to be in 10 different markets. And we're going to And I look at them and I'm like, yeah, all they're thinking about is, and what does this mean for me?
For me.
What does this mean for my job? Am I still going to have a job? Do I have to now work Asia hours? Like, what's happening? And you're not there. They don't feel connected. And so sometimes when we feel stuck, it's not because our work doesn't matter. We just don't have sight lines to why it matters.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to sort of take that step back and have those conversations sometimes with, the people around us about sort of what we're doing and how it actually impacts their lives and our lives.
So many high achievers feel like they're checking all the right boxes, right? Like, I know I was this person. I was like, check, 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 making the salary, doing the thing, but I wasn't fulfilled. What's a step someone can take to redefine success on their own terms and get that fulfillment?
Yeah. So when I was in executive search, I used to call people up to recruit them away on behalf of my clients. And it was my job to call the most successful people in the world. Like, that's why I was getting paid the big bucks. It's called the most successful people and recruit them away to work for my clients. So I would call them all because they were super successful, but they weren't very happy. So they'd all call me back. And I was fascinated by this. And so we would always say that there's like 8 motivating factors at any given time to encourage anybody to consider a new job. And there are things like, will I be inspired by the leadership? What's the mission of the organization? How broad is the impact? How deep is the skill set that I'm going to learn? That sort of stuff. And how prestigious will it look on my resume? Where is it located? Et cetera, et cetera. And of course, money. Mm-hmm. But money is only one of them. And what we've learned from that study that I mentioned earlier, the 10,000 responses from 74 different countries, is that less than 38% of people say money is the number one most important factor determining their happiness at work. It may be the second, it may be the third, but it is not the number one. And at every age and at every stage, we want different things. So when you're younger, you may say, I want to take a job that's going to look super prestigious on my resume. Even if I don't really feel like the work I'm doing really necessarily matters, it's going to give me good career growth. Or you may say, I want to do work that is maximizing my income because I'm going to, have some kids and I'm going to be working part-time, right? So there are different things that we want at different ages and at different stages. So what I would say to people is that when you got handed that list of these 8 motivating factors in some form by somebody, whether it was a high school counselor, a college counselor, or somebody saying, pick a trade, pick a major, pick a college, pick a track, right? They gave you this list and it was probably in a very specific order. And they never said to you, prioritize that list for you. They also never said, and by the way, every 7 years or so, you're going to be a totally different human. The world around us changes. I did a podcast right after Limitless came out and somebody's like, what advice would you give your 22-year-old self? And I was like, my 22-year-old self, like, who's listening to a podcast on her cell phone? It was recorded over the internet. Like, none of those things existed when I was 22. So even if I knew myself at 22, the world around us changes so much. So the first thing I would say to people is, think about what actually, think about that list, right? What motivates you? What's exciting to you? It's not just what makes a good job good, but it's what makes a good job good for you right now at this point in time. And so the first thing I would say to people is, give yourself some grace, because whatever definition you gave yourself 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it probably isn't the definition that you want now. And The second thing I would say is nobody cares.
Right? That nobody cares piece.
Nobody
FYI,
cares.
It's just you and it's what you like. And there's no one to turn this into and for them to give you credit or discredit for whatever you pick.
Right. And we spend all this time giving votes in our lives to people who shouldn't have voices. Like how many times have you run into somebody at a coffee shop and you tell them about your big, hairy, scary goal and they're like, oh, Jen, interesting. Right. And you're like, or they say like, you can't do that. That's too scary. What they really mean is I can't do that. I'm too scared.
Yeah.
And then the problem is, as soon as we get that first failure, right, we're like, oh no, maybe it's not my passion, right? And then it becomes this like cancer in our brains.
Yeah.
And we're like, maybe that friend of mine from high school who's like completely a loser was actually right about me. Like maybe I shouldn't do this. And it becomes the seed of doubt that just grows into this like tsunami and it becomes very difficult to push through it.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And what I love from binging all your content is you really get into purpose isn't something we find. It's something we build.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people miss that. So can we get into that a little bit? Because I love the fact that it's you build purpose.
Can we start by saying that purpose doesn't have to have the words lofty or higher in front of it?
Yeah, thank you.
And again, by the way, I did executive search for mission-driven organizations for 20 years. So I feel like I'm an unimpeachable source when I say you don't have to like put on the, like the do-gooder hat in order to do good in the world. Like if you are exceptional at making a lot of money, it may be that your highest and best use is to make a lot of money and then donate it to a cause you care about, as opposed to working for that cause and not being that good at it and not actually bringing in enough money they can hire 3 of you.
Oh, I love that you're saying this. I love that you're saying this because I'm in investment services back in the day and we'd have people come in and they'd be like, well, I only want to invest in these things. I'm like, you can, but then your return isn't where you want it to be. So then you're not gonna be able to do the thing you need to do. So how else can we impact this thing that might look differently than what you thought?
Everybody's purpose is their purpose. And there were a lot of people in this world who had to make decisions for their lives because they or their parents were in debt up to their eyeballs.
Yep.
And maybe they want to make a lot of money because they want their kids to be able to make decisions that they weren't able to make. That's a great purpose to have. There are also people in this world who want to cure cancer. That's a great purpose to have too. There are also people in this world who want to be home with having dinner on the table with their family at 6 p.m. every day. That's a great purpose too. And there are other people who want to buy a Maserati and a beach house. Cool, right? Your purpose is your purpose. That's it. Plain and simple. And we also don't just have like one purpose or one calling in life. It changes. We change. The world changes. And so, I think that we get fed this like Instagram perfect world of like, namaste, like you're going to find this thing that's inside of you, follow your passion and don't, like stop apologizing, wash your face, all this nonsense. And on the, the bro side, it's like TEDx and hustle harder and rise and grind, right? Like it's just all this nonsense that tells you that there's only one way to be. And not only is there not one way to be, there's not even just one way to be for you or for me. Like each of us are like, what if the person that you were today and the purpose that you had in life today was the purpose you had for the rest of your life? How boring would that be? It would be terrible.
Like actually somebody asked me the other day, like if you could create the perfect mountain, what would you create to climb? I'm like, I would create a mountain that I didn't know what was coming because that's what's fun. You get to figure out like what you know and don't know and how you respond to things that you couldn't anticipate. And that's where the joy of life is lived.
Absolutely. I mean, in my next book, Wonder How, I talk about this idea of that every time you achieve something you didn't know you could do, you see a version of yourself that you didn't even know was in there. And like, how cool is that? That you're like, I didn't even know I could do this. And if I could do this, maybe I could do that. And suddenly then you're filled with like imposter syndrome and uncertainty and doubt and envy and exhaustion and burnout and anxiety and all of it. So it's like, it's wonderful, but it's hell. It's kind of wonder hell. And I think your climbing of these mountains is such a perfect analogy for that because, like when I I first interviewed Allison Levine for
Yes,
Limitless.
she's awesome.
And she told me the whole story about like going up the mountain, coming down the mountain, going up the mountain, going down, which I know you talk about in your great keynotes. And I said to her, I was like, so when you finally got to the top of Everest, right? Like, did you have a party up there? Like, is it amazing? And she was like, what are you talking about? She's like, no, you're up there for like 30 seconds. You take a picture, you go back down, because like getting to the top isn't success. It's getting back down alive, right? And it's all the things. And then, as soon as you get down, you're like, well, what else can I do? What else is in there? What else is possible? And I just got back from Tokyo. I just ran the Tokyo Marathon, and it was the sixth of the 6 major marathons.
Yeah, you did them all. That was
I did them all. I did them all. And like less than 2,000 American women have done it. And I ran my first mile of my life when I turned 40, right? So like I found like my inner athlete very late. But, it's very interesting because at the end of each marathon is I was like, okay, well, there's the next one and there's the next one. And could we do all 6? And oh my gosh. And now it's like, well, now what am I going to do? And I was watching this video that was talking about these ultra marathons that are like 50K. And I was like, well, a marathon is kind of horrible. And I actually hate running, but it's 42K. And if an ultra is only 50, I wonder if I could do So it's this, but it's
Something
not this
might
like
be teasing me right now with an idea in my head.
But it's not this like bigger, better, faster, more. You have to keep going. It's just this like, what a joy, what a privilege to be able to feel the burden of our potential growing every time we accomplish something, and knowing that there's something else that's there. Like, I don't know if I'll ever run another marathon, but I know I want to do another hard thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to know what else is inside of me. I want to know at the end of that pain cave, like just how far I could like dig out a little more and spelunk a little deeper. Like I'm so curious about our capacity as people. And you learn that. I mean, you're at the top of these mountains with, the oxygen on, and you've got people around you. And I'm sure it's not just getting yourself up there, right? It's like the whole team. And not everybody is all fully mentally in it the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you take turns, right? Like that's the magic of doing things where you bring people along with you.
Yes.
Is because then you can be like, okay, I'm not strong right now. So you're going to be strong for us and I'm going to be whiny. And like 5 minutes later, maybe we'll swap, but I need you to be the strong person and then I can be the whiny. And it's amazing how much you borrow from each other to get to the top. Which then when you get to the top, there's so much to celebrate because there's people with you.
I'm curious, when you're like emotionally carrying people with you up the mountain, is there like a common theme or a common thread of like where people weaken, like where the fascia starts to disintegrate?
You know what? It's so interesting. It's different for different people, right? And like when we did Everest, I had a guy in my team who had done 5 Ironmans. Like the full-blown Ironman in a row, right? And so we're getting close to getting to the top. And he's like, I'm done. No, what? No, you're not done. Like, what do you mean you're done? Like, we're not done. And he's like, no, I'm done. Like this, like whatever. He got mad about something and something took over in his brain and he said he was done. And so then we tied him to ropes and just dragged him for a little bit because he wasn't done. Like, we're not letting you quit. Like at this spot, I refuse to let you do this. And I think sometimes people envision themselves at the top, but they don't envision life past that.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Right? And so then they're like, well, if I did the thing, now what? And that's a scary thing for some people, because for this person in particular, he was from England and like wanted to climb Everest since he was like born, right? Like that was in his thing. And so he had never really thought about what it meant once he did it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was like he was self-sabotaging before the top.
And like of the people that don't climb, like that don't summit Everest. So say we had a unique year because there was a flu thing going, COVID going around base camp. So a lot of people didn't summit, but normally 30% of the people don't summit, maybe higher, maybe 40. But of those that don't summit, 90% is mental. It's not physical, right? It's this mental game that they haven't like played through the full story of what's next. So for me, Everest was a training ground for K2. So Everest was never like this huge weight because I never made it significant. I'm like, this is my training mountain. So this is what we're going to do. And so I always had something else to look forward to. But it was interesting just to be an observer and listen to the stories of things. And then, You just pull them along.
That's fascinating. I do a lot of speaking to entrepreneur groups, as I know you do. And when I do the Q&A, there's always somebody in the back who's like, well, what would you do? Like, I'm raising their hand. They're like, well, what would you do if you failed? What would you do if your company failed? And I was like, well, you're here at an entrepreneurship conference, and clearly you're an entrepreneur. What would you do if your company failed? And they always know the answer, right? They're like, oh, well, I would just create another business plan, and I've got this much savings, and I'd go work at a cubicle until I could get the next thing started. They always have a plan. And then I say, okay, so maybe you're asking the wrong question. What would you do if you succeeded? And I've been asking that question for nigh on 10 years now. And it's crickets. No one has ever had an answer. So it's so interesting, the parallel between not being able to get up Everest because they don't know what's on the other side, to like, if you're focusing on what you'll do if you fail, you spend all this time thinking about it. But then when you don't think about what you'll do if you succeed, then you actually you're not as successful, because like there's science behind like making your own luck. Right? There's science behind manifestation. When I first wrote Wonderhill, I was like, that's all nonsense. But it turns out that there's actually science behind all of it. And like people who make themselves lucky, who are luckier, they say yes to more things. They act like introverts. They put themselves in the way of opportunity by like going out and being in the flow. They assume good things are going to happen. They turn negatives into positives by like making everything a learning opportunity. So the people who become more successful are able to do that. But then they also manifest success, right? By like, if you are putting on your vision board and like pretty swirly, glittery font that you want to be working in a certain place, or you want to buy a certain sports car, if you want to go to Japan, right? All of a sudden you see a bus that goes past you that has a sale, like half price tickets to Japan. And you're like, oh, I manifested. It's a need to manifest it. Your brain is able to take in something like 11 million bits of data every single minute, but can only process 50. So you've literally told your brain to look for that one piece of data. So when you don't manifest the bus or the sale, you just told your brain to pluck that one piece of information out of the sky, like when it comes to you. So the people who are lucky are the ones who can actually envision success. They are able to manifest the deal, because when the thing comes along, they notice it and they say yes to it and they go. And so if when you have K2 to look forward to, it gets you to the other side, because you start noticing along the way all the things that are going to get you not just to the top of Everest, but will actually help you be more successful getting to the top of K2. So I love the parallels between those two.
Okay, so in your experience, what differentiates people that are great from good?
You mean like in terms of talent, in terms of what they're capable of doing?
Yeah, like you're going to run across somebody, and like you said, you can see where they could go. What's like keeping them from going?
Well, this is actually the topic of my next book.
See, perfect lead-in.
Yeah, so I'm like sort of very freshly thinking about this. For my next book, what I'm doing is I'm interviewing legendary talent spotters, like A&R executives at record companies, like people who are like picking out like venture capital money. I want to interview RuPaul, right? I want to interview like the Sharks. I want to interview like just anybody who is in a position like NCAA championship coaches. Like, how do they know like that diamond in the rough is actually going to turn out to be like, the star? And based on the work that I did in executive search, we used to look for things beyond just the resume, beyond just the bio. And we'd look for things like hunger, tenacity, weight, speed, grit, wonder. We'd look for agility, plasticity, right? There's like a constellation of things. And I think what it's coming down to is really high achiever. Like if you have a Venn diagram, there's high achiever, there's agile learner, and then there's team energizer. And it's very hard to find all three. That's like the greatness unicorn. The problem is that we look for people who have one. So you want to bring in like your superstar salesperson. They're a high achiever, right? Like they have volition, right? They have like their self-starters. They're hungry. They're tenacious, right? Like that's your superstar salesperson. The problem is if they're just a high achiever and they don't think about the team, they don't have empathy or seriousness like weight or their wonder, right, a possibility, then they don't bring anyone along with them. And if they're not an agile learner who has agility and plasticity and sort of curiosity, then they don't care that much about like are they selling the product you really want them to sell, right? Or are they just getting their numbers, but they don't care about fulfillment or quality, right? So if you think about each one individually, it's very hard. And I think what separates the good from the great are people who are either the high achiever who is an agile learner, which makes them an innovator, the agile learner who is the team energizer, which sort of makes them a mentor, right? Or you have the high achiever who's also the team energizer, and that sort of makes them the cheerleader, right? They bring people, they're the catalyst, right? They get people excited about something that's new. So people who really have like two pieces of this, that they have like a strong primary, and then there's like a shadow. And I think it's our job as parents, as mentors, as leaders, as friends, to look at our people that are over indexing on one and be like, you also have a little bit of this other part of you. And like, let's bring that out too.
Oh, I like that.
So I don't know. That's a very long, complicated answer to your question. But I guess if I were to look for somebody and be like, are they going to be good or are they going to be great? I'd probably ask myself, are they insatiably hungry for the thing they're talking about? Because I heard like all manner of people come to me with these hairy, scary goals. Like you, like people come to me like, I want to climb a mountain. And you're like, do you? Or is it just a look good goal? That like look good on the wall.
Do you know what goes on behind that? Like you're paying to suffer and pee in a hole. I'm just letting you know.
Absolutely.
Like, are you ready for all of that?
And if you are not insatiably hungry for that goal, like you cannot be insatiably hungry for someone else's goal. So if you are not insatiably hungry for that goal, that is a lot of pain and suffering and frozen pee for like an incomplete. For a DNF.
Living in Park City, we have the U.S. ski and snowboard team. And so then for some reason, everybody thinks that their kid's going to be the next like Ted, and you're like, I love it that as a parent, you're really excited about your child, but the difference between your child being good at a sport and being an Olympic athlete has all to do with your child. Like there's nothing you can do for them except provide the lessons. They have to have the desire and the delusional thought process to get through that.
And they have to be tenacious. They have to have grit. Volition is so important, right? Are you a self-starter? Do you care? Do you want it? Like, is it something, like, again, like you have to have this thing in your core that says, I can't not do it.
Yeah.
Right? I can't not do it. And, when I dropped out of law school and I joined Bill Clinton's presidential campaign, I did it because he talked about this idea of community service in exchange for college tuition. And I was like, that has to happen. I have to go do that. It wasn't anything else about him. It wasn't anything about the Democratic Party or like any other policy that he had. It wasn't that I hated law school, though I did hate law school. I was just like that thing. Like it just called to me in that moment.
Yeah, I grabbed you and you went with it. Okay, so when you look back on work and impact, what's the legacy that you hope to leave behind?
It's a good question. I am very proud of the fact that everything I've ever been part of creating still exists. Like I feel like I worked very hard in my career to create institutions and not cathedrals. And I think a lot of times as parents, as entrepreneurs, as leaders, we try to create these cathedrals to ourselves.
Yep.
And then as soon as we leave, or maybe we can't leave because we're trapped because our name's on the door, they all fall apart. And so, I think writ large, the legacy is institutions, not cathedrals. But honestly, on a day-to-day basis, I hope people show up at my funeral and just say, my life was just a little bit better because she was in it. And beyond that, I don't know that we can ask for more. That's really it.
I think that's magic. I think that's awesome. That was a perfect answer. All right. So how does everybody book you for speaking, find out where all your books are, all that great stuff?
Yeah. So my name is Laura Gassner Otting. All my friends call me LGO. So you can find me at HEYLGO on all the socials. And I'm at lauragassnerotting.com. Books are sold wherever fine books are sold. And if you want to get unstuck, I guess people can also go take the Limitless Assessment at limitlessassessment.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Laura. We really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. This has been great.